Hello, welcome again to Lansing, from Lansing to the Lakeshore for the 24th District. I'm Senator Patty Birkholz, and we're back again with another show talking about what's happening here in Lansing and helping introduce you to people who are of importance and who make decisions that affect all of us throughout not only the 24th District but the state of Michigan. And today my guest is Laura Chapelle, who's a commissioner with the Public Service Commission in Lansing. And we're going to start out by asking you, Laura, first of all, welcome.
Thanks
for being
here. Thank you for having me.
And secondly, please tell us about the Public Service Commissioner and your job as a Public Service Commission.
Thank you, Senator. Actually, the Public Service Commission is a body made up of 3 appointed commissioners. We're appointed by the governors for a 6-year term. I was appointed by former Governor John Engler in 2001, and my term is ending in this summer in 2007. And it's a body of 3, and we regulate electric, gas, telephone, and some aspects of motor carrier in Michigan. We essentially set rates and we set the terms of service for these entities. And actually, we have been around for over 100 years. The Public Service Commission used to be the Railroad Commission. And if you think about that, railroads were built along the public right-of-way, and that's where the electric and telephone lines were originally strung. And from that, the regulation went from railroads to electric and telephone, and eventually gas.
Okay, that's very helpful, I think, for all of us to understand. So the Public Service Commission does a lot involving things that we use every day in our lives that maybe we don't think about until there's a problem, like our telephone lines are down, or our electric isn't working, or our bills have gone up and we're concerned about the electric costs and the gas costs and those kinds of things. So you're very much involved in that part of the business, aren't you?
Absolutely, and again, it's due to senators, it's due to statutory legislation, because again, years ago, starting with the railroads and moving on to these essential utilities, they're really a public necessity. They were deemed by the legislature 100 years ago to be a public necessity. We need electricity, we need effective transportation, we need telephone service to some degree. Those have lessened throughout the years, but certainly when it's deemed to be a public good, that's when statutes were created to form these state entities that would oversee and be the regulatory body to set the rates and make sure that there's good service to benefit the public.
So as commissioners appointed by the governor, you are people from various walks of life in Michigan to try and give an independent review. Is that
Yes.
a safe?
Absolutely. We're like administrative judges.
Okay.
We are a semi-independent agency, meaning we're appointed by the governor, we're housed in the executive department. Our budget very much relies on the executive office to some extent, but yet we sit independently when we're reviewing cases. When a utility, an electric utility comes in and asks, because they have to ask for a rate increase, the 3 commissioners with our staff will have a contested case, let other parties come in and say why that should happen or should not happen, or if it should happen differently. And then at the end of the day, the commission issues a binding order, which will say this is what the rate shall be and this is what the terms of service will be.
All right, well, speaking of electric rates, this has been a year when we have seen some increases in our electric rates, and it's been a concern for a lot of people, especially for those of us who kind of pay attention to what's happening in some of the other Great Lakes states, although we certainly haven't seen the dramatic increases that other states in our Great Lakes region have seen. We have seen some increases, and to some degree, as we talk with our friends and relatives from other states in the basin, we are a little concerned. Are ours going to go that high? So can you talk a little bit about electric rates and why we've seen some increases recently?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good question, and we at the commission all have families and friends as well, and we go out to local communities and we try to talk and educate various communities around the state about their rates and what's happening, and we certainly hear complaints and concerns, and those are certainly well-founded. Let me start out by saying Michigan has been a higher cost state, as many of our eastern counterparts and some in the Midwest, because we have nuclear plants. Plants down south that are sitting very close to coal beds, and they are using coal really for almost all. They use very little natural gas, mostly coal for their big baseload plants. Those are going to be the states with the cheaper power. And so historically, states down south in particular have had more competitive rates than Michigan. And there's a trade-off. Of course, now we know with the environmental issues, I think it's also a good trade-off that states like Michigan and the eastern states have these nuclear plants and are in fact looking forward to increasing our nuclear capacity. But we do have higher rates, but as you said, all across the country, not only in deregulated states, but even down south, and even certainly out west, everybody across the board is seeing rate increases, and it's just like gasoline. It's because the underlying price for the fuel has increased. There's supply and demand, and as you know, again, just like gasoline, the price of oil for various reasons has gone up, but we're still driving, and we're still driving larger cars. Same thing with coal. With a lot of these products that are being used to generate electricity, wholesale prices and national prices for the commodity itself have gone up. And under the law, we as regulators have to pass on at least the cost of that fuel, because otherwise then we wouldn't have healthy Michigan utilities. And at the end of the day, you want your utility to be healthy and have the funds it needs to provide good service.
You know, when we talk about electric rates and what's happening here, we also have been hearing recently about PA 141, which was deregulation, or as many of us who worked on that legislation like to say, restructuring
Absolutely.
of electric here in Michigan a few years ago. And there's been a lot of discussion about going back to a totally monopolistic system with our utilities, or should we stay in what is a restructured kind of environment? And I'll let you talk about that, but I'll let you start out, but I do have some questions for you about it.
Well, first let me say PA 141 is public act. It was a public act number 141 back in 2000. And essentially, you are absolutely correct, it did not deregulate. Many of the eastern states, again the higher cost states, were hoping to get prices down by freeing up their generation, telling regulators you no longer can set rates for the regulation. It's just freed up, and it's subject to whatever the market can bear. And obviously, as I've just explained, the wholesale prices have gone up, and so they have had some immediate sticker shock with some very big increases. In Michigan, that absolutely was not what we did. We did not deregulate, let go of our generation. We used it kind of as a first step to think about whether or not we should go all the way to deregulation. And what we set up was choice for those that want it and protection for those that need it. And that's exactly the way it's played out in Michigan. Primarily, some industrials, many commercial entities have availed themselves to choice. In order to do that, they've had to pay some stranded costs to the host in-state